If you're an entrepreneur or a business leader and you're struggling because you're working in the day-to-day of the business, you're not alone. Most businesses think that there's a CEO in the organization and that CEO drives the vision and also drives execution. But in reality, those two opposing forces, vision and execution, are really challenging for one person to do alone. And this is where I want to introduce a concept to you in the entrepreneurial operating system called the visionary and the integrator. In this video, I'm going to talk about the visionary and integrator relationships. I'm going to define what those two roles or those two functions really are and how you can best structure your organization to manage those two opposing and complementary forces effectively in your business so that you can not only create a powerful vision for your organization, but also execute effectively and consistently so that you can get more of what you want out of your business. Now, very simply, I'm going to give you a couple definitions here of what visionary and integrator really are. So the visionary of an organization is the person, is the function that sits at the very top of the organization. It's the function that sits at 50,000 feet. They love to see the big picture. They love looking way out 10 years out and looking at what this company can become. They love focusing on things like big relationships, problem solving, and all of the creative solutions. And they tend to bring something like 20 or 30 different ideas to every single meeting they're in. Most of those ideas are bad, but a couple of those ideas are really, really good. And that's where the integrator comes in. The integrator is the function that sits in the organization that drives accountability in the organization. It really holds the leadership team accountable and makes sure that they are all working in harmony to execute really well on that vision. And so they're like the glue that really holds everything together. Now, when you look at vision and visionary and integrator, when I describe those two positions, you can tell that they're both two opposing forces in a lot of ways. One is very visionary. One doesn't like to hold people accountable. They don't like to have the difficult conversations. They don't like to be in the day-to-day. And the other loves to be in the day-to-day, driving accountability, making sure that objectives are met, and all of these things. And so they're opposing forces. And the reason that they're opposing forces is why that concept was created, that these two functions should be separate. Because if the visionary is laser focused on being a visionary and focusing on that big picture vision, and the integrator is laser focused on driving accountability, when you can get those two functions working in sync, it creates this momentum, this fuel, what EOS would call rocket fuel for your organization, so that you can keep taking it to the next level and you're not getting in your own way as a leader of the organization. You're not giving your organization whiplash. And I have evidence of this because I worked as both the visionary and integrator in the company I used to run, my family's 100-year-old family business. And really the reason that I sat in the visionary and integrator role were twofold. A, because at the time when I was elected as the president and CEO of the company, I didn't know what a visionary or integrator was. I didn't even know about EOS at the time. And frankly, the other reason was because that's the way we'd always done it. Every CEO previously was just considered to be the person that brought the vision to the organization and the person that held the leadership team accountable. We had no reason to understand that a person that having the right person in that seat as CEO that could create a powerful vision and execute well on it was truly a unicorn type of person. People like that don't exist very often. And so I was sitting in both of those seats when I came into the organization, and I've already felt the struggle. I felt the pull. I felt the exhaustion and the frustration around feeling like we could create a better vision, but also feeling like I was being pulled into the business and the day-to-day and all of the drama that existed in there. And if I'm being honest, I wasn't very happy doing that because I didn't know my true zone of genius as of yet. But when we started implementing EOS in our organization, I learned about these concepts of the visionary and integrator. I learned that they were opposing but complementary forces. And I learned why my energy was so depleted was because I truly was a better fit for that visionary seat. That's what I brought to the table. I'm more of a visionary. I bring those big ideas. I don't like being in the day to day as much. Because I was sitting also in that integrator position, I wasn't really serving the team as well as I could. Now, immediately we couldn't necessarily make the change of putting somebody in that function, in the integrator function. But over the course of the next few years, when we got to a point where we could, I started to transition somebody into that seat so that I could focus more on being that visionary. And that made all of the difference. But for a time, I had to sit in both functions, and you may have to sit in both seats as well. And if you are in this video, I'd like to describe not only what the visionary and integrator are and how to better put the right people in the right seats and how to manage a company with a visionary and integrator, but also I want to give you some tips and suggestions on how to manage your company now, how to live in your company now if you're sitting in both the visionary and the integrator seats, like I was. Because I came away with it as an EOS implementer now. I came away from that experience understanding how you can compartmentalize both and live intentionally in both. But before I do that, I want to get into a little bit about why these two functions are so important for an organization. First of all, every organization has some level of vision and some level of integration. It doesn't matter if you're a brand new startup with a ton of innovation and a ton of growth coming up, or you're a 100-year-old company. Vision is really what drives the future of the organization, whether it's the culture, whether it's knowing where you're going 10 years from now, or being able to predict. There is a visionary element to your organization, and strengthening it is vitally important. The execution side of that is also important. This is why the EOS model has vision at the top of the model. That creating that vision and getting it shared by everybody in the organization so that everybody is rowing in the same direction. Somebody has to be driving that in the team, in the leadership team, and the leadership team has to demonstrate that so that everybody gets bought into it. Then on the opposite end, on the bottom of the model, is the traction component. And the traction component is basically the execution component of EOS. And this is where that execution, that day-to-day execution happens with how you're having your meetings with the organization, what goals you're setting, how you're holding each other accountable. That's all about the execution. And those two forces in the organization, it should be run at the top of the organization by leadership. And when you have somebody, a person that's sitting in both of those functions, and they're not intentional about keeping those functions separate, what happens is the waters tend to get muddy between vision and execution. You may bring a lot of different ideas to every meeting, and your leadership team will want to act on those. So every time you bring a new idea, they're going to change course and they're going to get whiplash. And what's going to happen is you're going to change course so often because of all of these new and different ideas that you're not going anywhere. It's what one of my leaders once called a whole lot of feathers, but not a lot of chicken. You're doing a lot of activity, but you're not getting a whole lot of traction. And that's where true visionaries sitting in the integrator role get stuck. On the opposite end of the spectrum, when you have somebody who has more of an integrator energy that's also acting as a visionary, well, a lot of times they're not bringing a lot of vision to the table, and the team is wondering where they're going, is where they need to go for the long term, and so they're getting there's a lot of frustration within the ranks of, well, why are we here? What is the purpose? Where are we going? And what is our rallying cry? And that's why you need both visionary and integrator. They're such powerful forces. And while they're opposing forces, they're also complementary forces. Because when you can have those two functions working in sync, when you have a visionary that's bringing those 20 ideas and it's filtered through a great integrator with the right person, right seat, and the integrator is executing well and holding the team accountable, well, that's where you're building momentum and you're growing. So ideally, because of all of this, these functions should be filled by two separate people. You should have the right type of visionary, and you should have the right type of integrator. And there's tools within within EOS that can help you find that. Through Rocket Fuel University, you can go and actually take an assessment to find out which energy you have, more visionary energy, where you do bring more big ideas, you bring that big vision, you love sitting at 50,000 feet, you love solving creative problems, but you don't necessarily like being in the day to day and don't like having difficult conversations. Well, you might find that you're more of a visionary, or you might find that you're more of an integrator through these assessments, somebody that really likes to drive accountability, lead the team, sit in the day to day, be more operation focused, and create that operational excellence. Knowing where you are gives you this self awareness, and that's the first piece. Is before you make any changes, before you put people in the seats, have some self awareness about where you're going. Because a lot of times, if you're in an organization, if you were like how we were within the company that I used to run, you may not be in a place where you're able to, or that you're ready to bring on a visionary or an integrator that could be your opposite but complementary function. And so the first step there is just to be self-aware and start moving in that direction. And there's a couple of things that you can do there. If you're sitting in both of those functions now, what I want to share in a bit is some of the tools that you can use to better compartmentalize your time so that you can be more effective in sitting in both of those seats. But the next phase of that could be that you bring on, say, a fractional integrator, somebody that can help you to bridge the gap from where you are now to bringing somebody on full time. But I want to make it clear that if you're going to bring in any fractional, especially in a position like an integrator that is so vital to the organization, I mean, people are going to look up to this person as a leader. They are going to be these people are going to be driving accountability in the organization. So it's important that you move in a direction where you have a more permanent resident in that seat, so that people see that that person is committed to this. Fractional integrators are great. They're great at bridging that gap, but really just sort of see them as that bridge to get to a more full-time position at some point. The other thing is you want to get to a point where you have those as separate people, those functions as separate people, because you want them to be laser focused on their specific function. You want a visionary who's great at being a visionary to be laser focused on vision, on bringing those ideas. And you don't want them distracted by the things that they don't like to do and they're not great at. When we're doing more things that we don't like to do and we might not be great at, we're actually costing the company money, and we're costing ourselves valuable time and energy. If you've ever been in a position where you have not liked the function you're in, or you've not been great at it, you know how much it drains your energy. And when your energy is drained, you can't bring a great vision to the organization. The same is true with the integrator. If you're going to find a great integrator, you have to make sure that they're laser focused on their zone of genius, on what they're great at doing and what they love to do. Otherwise, if they get too distracted with the visionary conversations, well, then they're not going to be holding people accountable to their best of ability. You're holding those people back. This is why I say, when you're looking at these visionary and integrator roles, looking at it just from a high level, you may think that they're redundant because you think that, well, just a great CEO should be able to do both. What you're really doing is you're taking a great leader and you're dividing their time between something that they're great at, but also something that they don't like to do, and that's going to drain them, and that's going to take their energy away from what they are great at. Instead, if you invest in the right types of leaders for both of these functions, you can scale faster, you can go farther, and you can get more of what you want from your business, and ultimately more freedom for you. So really pay attention to that. If you're thinking, well, we want to save money and we don't want to overwhelm ourselves with more corporate overhead or anything like that, those aren't the best reasons not to get an integrator. Make sure you're making these decisions for the right reasons. And in addition to that, if you have somebody that's doing both of these functions, remember the impact that it's going to have on the rest of your organization. If somebody is trying to do one of those functions that they're not great at, or they're muddying the waters between vision and execution, what's going to happen is it's going to create chaos within the ranks, and more of your functions are going to be unproductive because you're not going to have the clarity of vision and you're not going to have the clarity of accountability and execution. Having both of those functions separate and the right people in those seats creates a level of clarity that helps you to go farther faster and actually improves the level of your culture. So get out of your own way. Now, let me address the reality of where you may be right now. If you are an entrepreneur, maybe you're at an earlier stage, or you're at a stage where you just can't bring on an integrator or visionary yet. Let me talk about how some tools and tips that you can use to maybe maybe manage both of those functions a little better for yourself during the course of the week. Because I know from experience, my own experience, that it often feels like you're trying to carry two brains in one skull, and it gets really crowded in there. So the first tool I want to share with you that can help you to better compartmentalize these two within your own brain is called the clarity break. The clarity break is simply just intentional time that you spend with yourself. I know, scary, but you spend this time with yourself journaling and thinking about visionary ideas. This is actually time that you should be able to spend as the visionary, because you're looking forward in the organization. You're looking at the biggest challenges, and you shouldn't be turning these ideas into do's. You're just simply journaling and reflecting on what's working, what's not working in the organization. So some great journal prompts that you can use are things like, what's working in the organization? What's not working in the organization? If I could snap my fingers and have the company that I wanted right now, what would that look like? What do we look like 10 years from now? All of these things are visionary ideas. And if you are truly at your heart a visionary that's also sitting in the integrator seat, this is your intentional time to separate that out and spend intentional time in that visionary seat. And the reason that this is important is because if you're sitting in those functions as opposing as they are, you want to be intentional about being clear at any given time what seat you're sitting in. And when you are giving yourself that time, because let's be clear and let's be fair. If you're sitting in both of those functions and you are managing your team, you're going to be pulled more often into that integrator seat, because people are going to want to talk to you. You're going to be having to hold people accountable. You're going to have difficult conversations. You're going to be pulled more often into that seat, and you're going to be left, vision is going to be left hanging. So making that intentional time, maybe once or twice a week, to have a clarity break. Doesn't have to be very long. It could be 30 minutes, an hour. You could even spend a day out of the entire month just taking that clarity break. Whatever works for you, whatever the rhythm is that feels right for you, take that clarity break and be intentional about it so that you can focus on that visionary energy. You may not have to do anything about it. And reality, chances are, with most of the ideas you put forward, you shouldn't do anything about them. But you can get them all out on paper, and you can get intentional there. It also helps you to capture those visionary ideas and sit on them for a while to really assess whether they're good or not. Time really helps you to identify whether ideas are really good or not. Now, the second tool I want to share with you is something that you would do after the clarity break. It doesn't have to be directly after. It could be, maybe a day or two after, but I would recommend having a solo same page meeting. Now, within the EOS world, between the visionary and integrator, one of the rules, the 5 rules of a visionary and integrator is that you get on the same page, that the visionary and integrator get on the same page. So typically visionaries and integrators have a same page meeting once a month or once every couple of weeks, just to make sure that they're on the same page with where they're going and the messages that they're putting out there. You need to do this with yourself too, because once you create those visionary ideas, all of that stuff that's on paper, you still don't necessarily have a direction that you're going to take with them. So that same page meeting is when you take a lot of those ideas, when you're with yourself, and you take that time to parse through those ideas and really get clear to identify, with the mindset of an integrator, shifting between that visionary and integrator, which of those ideas are truly actionable, which are driving you in the direction of your long-term vision. Gives you a chance to look at your vision traction organizer to see where your 10-year picture is, or your 10-year target is, and your 3-year picture, and make sure that those ideas or those things that you want to implement within the next week, 2 weeks, 1 month are truly going to move you in that direction, are truly going to move the needle. Because that's where that visionary energy can truly turn into integrator energy, and you can start to know what you need to execute on. That's where the same page meeting comes into play. What you don't want to do or what you decide not to do. If you bring 20 different ideas to that same page meeting, and you go forward with 2 of them, well, you don't just like throw those 18 other ideas away. You throw them onto a not now list. You throw them onto your long-term issues list so that you can assess them later. And also, don't forget, you ideally will have a leadership team around you of marketing, sales, operations, finance, that at some point in time, even during your quarterlies, you can run these ideas by. But just make sure that you're clarifying that these are not directives. These are ideas that you're thinking about. Bring them into the conversation. But just know that in that same page meeting, this is you going between visionary and integrator and filtering those ideas that you have through that integrator filter. You should walk out of that same page meeting with a handful of to-dos that are really going to move the needle forward on your with your execution. Now, the final tip that I have for you with regard to trying to compartmentalize those visionary and integrator seats that you're sitting in both of, is to make sure that you're spending about 80% of your time in that integrator seat. And when you're sitting in the integrator seat, be the integrator. And this is just kind of more of a letting you know how it's going to work rather than a something that you need to implement. Because when you're running your business, most of the time that you're spending is going to be in the day to day, especially if you're sitting in the integrator seat. So know that about 80% of your time is going to be in that integrator seat. And when you're in the integrator seat, be the integrator. Don't bring the visionary to the table there, because you truly want to hold your team accountable unless you're being intentional about saying, hey, this is a brainstorming session. We're not moving forward anything. Once you decide on where you're going, be that integrator. Hold people accountable to what's expected of them, and do the integrator work, which is truly being a great leader, being a great manager, and being great at holding people accountable. It's within that 80% that's going to drive that traction. So as hard as it may be for visionaries to hold teams accountable, to have the difficult conversations, I really suggest that you learn to do that. And if you can't learn to do that, you're going to need to bring somebody on who can sooner rather than later. And of course, do all of this with the goal of long-term bringing on the counterpart that you desperately need. Whether you're a visionary or integrator, bring on the counterpart so that you can bring that rocket fuel to the organization. That is the only best way that you can scale your organization. Don't expect yourself to be the unicorn that can sit in both seats permanently, because it's in that focus that you're able to spend more of your time laser focused on the thing that you're great at. Visionaries can spend the best of their time building relationships, building a strong culture, taking those big bets and putting all of the ideas out there. And the integrator can spend their time executing on the vision that you've created, holding people accountable and being that glue that holds everyone together. And within that process, you find a partner that can be your opposite, that can frustrate you, that can debate you, but that you can create a healthy relationship with, that will move the company forward in the direction that you want it to go. And remember, this is not an overnight hire. This is a key strategic function in your organization. So be crystal clear on what you want out of them. Be crystal clear on what your organization stands for so that you bring the right person into the right seat there. Somebody that is truly passionate about driving your vision forward, not just somebody who has a heartbeat who can fill the seat. This is truly someone you want to be strategic and really drive the company forward. So remember, the visionary creates the future. The integrator creates the traction. And together, these two opposing forces can drive the company forward, vision and execution, so that the rest of the organization can follow along and follow suit. Making sure that you have the right people in both of those seats is critical. But if you find yourself right now sitting in both of those functions, just follow those 3 simple steps. A clarity break as the visionary, same page meeting to make sure that you're aligning that visionary and that integrator energy within yourself. And then spending 80% of your time when you're with your teams being the integrator and really driving accountability. And then work toward bringing on the right person in that integrator seat or that visionary seat over time, whatever the opposite is of what you want to be doing as the entrepreneur or the business leader. And if you want help with this, be sure to reach out to me. I'm happy to help support you on your EOS journey. Because yes, you can grow by sitting in both of those seats. But if you want true freedom, you'll start working on getting the right people in those seats.